Balázs Vigó. I'm a senior lecturer at ELTE Ötvös Loránd University, Faculty of Law and Political Sciences, in the Department of Roman Law and Comparative Legal History. With this short presentation, I will lead you into the questions and topic of reason and passion in Hungarian criminal law. The notorious case of Jean Calas, and after the work on the topic from Cesare Beccaria, entitled The Ideality delle Pene on Crime and Punishment in 1764, created a new image of human from the point of view of criminal law. The human from that time became rational, self-seeker and free in criminal law. Self-seeker meant that he or she is willing to accept what is good for him or her, and after that facing the consequences of his or her deed, let it be a criminal offense with sanction or refraining from a criminal act. And after that, balancing between the advantages and disadvantages, that person is free to choose between the two acts, that is, committing a crime or refraining from it. However, from the 19th century, the image of a human has changed a lot, because it turned out to be, due to Auguste Comte and positivism, that the human being can be social, biological, anthropological, or psychological. It means that the human is either determined by social phenomena and circumstances or conditions, or he or she is determined by biological, anthropological traits or characters, or even the inner psychological characters and instincts, for example, that determines his or her action in committing a crime. However, that was not always the case. In the 16th and 17th century, so the first part of the early modern age, the conflict of reason and passion was a topic that theoreticians dealt with, because if you wanted to act, you had to be aware of this act and, of course, the consequences. So, reason showed a person what is need to be done. However, if you were aware of the consequences and you willingly wanted to refrain from that because, for example, it's a crime, like in the case of Prince Hamlet, then you could get easily depressed or melancholic by knowing what to do but not acting actually. However, to win over your reason, passion was needed, because passion made this person to act. So, to act, you had to have that passion that should prevail over reason. That was also the case with Hamlet, but in that case, Hamlet gets mad, and by losing his or her mind, the person acts finally, not caring of the consequences. So, the reason and passion conflict of the early modern age made people choose between the two, and that was a preliminary, a first step of the free will to have that passion that drives you to act. Some part of this conflict of reason and passion is not just an interesting thing of the past, a little tiny treasure from our history, but it can be revealed somehow in the Hungarian criminal code in the case of homicide in the heat of passion. The code says that a person who kills another person in the heat of passion caused by a legitimate reason is guilty of felony and shall be punished by imprisonment for 2 to 8 years. Let's dissect this statutory crime now. First of all, I should note that one critical error of the translation cited above, although is nonetheless the translation available on the official English language database of Hungarian laws, is that the original text of the statute does not say legitimate reason, but equitable reason. If the killing is legitimate, that is, justifiable defense, or necessity for that matter, the commission of a crime is dogmatically impossible, since the criminal code does not regard the justified killing of another person to be a crime. Crimes in the heat of passion are not unknown to Western jurisprudence. Both of the common law and continental jurisdictions and Hungarian criminal jurisprudence and legislation follows suit in recognizing the need for differentiation with regards to the special nature of these crimes. The need for differentiation stems from the recognition of the fact that although the act of killing and the subsequent death as a result indeed occurs, the perpetrator's state of mind is highly affected by one or a variety of external factors, usually the behavior of the victim, and this cumulation of external stressors drive the perpetrator into a state of rage that is morally justifiable. Hungarian criminal jurisprudence explained this by, in part, borrowing from the inventory of discoveries of psychology. Hungarian criminal law recognizes a collapse of conscience on the part of the perpetrator and divided it into two subcategories. Pathological, which is an abnormal state of mind which is considered to be a ground for insanity, but the root of this subcategory of collapse of conscience stems from the perpetrator himself, as in, the perpetrator has a mental illness that overwhelms their control over their actions. Psychological, which is also an abnormal state of mind that is momentarily present in an otherwise mentally fit person, but dissolves with the passage of time. Within the context of homicide in the heat of passion, we are talking about psychological collapse of thought, or what we would colloquially refer to as a person losing their mind. Provided that this state of mind occurs, the person acting in a fit of rage was driven into this fit of rage by a morally, or for that matter, criminally contemptible act, which induced a momentary state of cognitive collapse. The person acting in this fit of rage has virtually no control over their acts, but this lack of control would not have occurred in the first place had the reprehensible circumstance not exist. This lack of control results in killing a person. The affective mechanism provides for a certain set of circumstances that separate it from an ordinary homicide, namely the following. First, the perpetrator's intent to kill shall form in the fit of rage. This excludes the presence of any sort of deliberate premeditation or preliminary planning on the part of the perpetrator, thus making premeditated commission conceptually excluded or impossible. Second, the fit of rage or momentary psychological collapse of conscience shall be brought on by a morally justifiable cause. It is also important to note that a general shortness of temper characteristic to the perpetrator is not a ground for establishing homicide in a heat of passion, and neither is a self-induced intoxication. It is a generally well-known fact to all that alcohol shortens the temper of any individual, let alone people with a hot temper. The most common cause found by Hungarian courts to be a legally justifiable cause for a fit of rage resulting in homicide is the provocative behavior of the victim. In one instance, the court found the perpetrator to be guilty of a homicide in the heat of passion with the following facts at hand. The perpetrator was a woman who was married to an alcoholic man who subjected her to permanent psychological and physical abuse. During one of these abusive encounters, the woman became fed up with her husband, permanently drunk and abusive, and in a fit of rage hit him in the head with a hammer, resulting in the death of the husband. The behavior of the victim may be both unlawful and grave. The unlawfulness of the victim's behavior may be only limited to scalding the perpetrator for a time or libel defamation. The gravity of the victim's behavior shall be investigated on a case-to-case basis. It is also worth noting that the victim's behavior may not always be unlawful. The interpersonal relationship of the victim and perpetrator is also a factor to be taken into account upon judging a case of homicide in the heat of passion. It also ought to be noted that Hungarian jurisprudence tends to investigate how proportionate the perpetrator's actions were compared to the preceding events of provocation. In other words, a provocation may drive one into an otherwise justifiable fit of rage, but if the gravity of the provocation is not proportionate to the consequences of the perpetrator's action, homicide in the heat of passion is not applicable. Third, the perpetrator shall commit the act of killing in the fit of rage. No limit in terms of how long this fit of rage may persist is set by Hungarian jurisprudence. It is thus theoretically possible for a fit of rage to extend into long hours instead of just second-long bursts of anger. It is also worth noting that if the perpetrator was, by the act of the victim, in a state of justifiable defense, but otherwise exceeds the scope of time during which they may exercise justifiable self-defense for that matter, the act of the perpetrator may be regarded as a homicide in the heat of passion. Let's think of it that we have just heard again, but on the level of the society, so on a macro level. An act against law by legitimate or equitable reason, driven by heat of passion. Might we call it a revolution if applied for and by the masses? Or is revolution just a civil war that has just been won? Otherwise, we call that act crime against the state. So either we are speaking of a criminal offense, or if it's successful against the state, it immediately turns to be a revolution. How is it? Well, these questions will be discussed by the end of the hypo. So see you soon. Until then, and follow the turbulent times of Elsinoria by Melanie. Thank you for your hopefully heated attention.